One of the single most common complaints that I hear, and I hear a lot of complaints when people have lived with a narcissist, is the complaint that says, that person always has to be right. Have you ever thought that way? You know, when you're dealing with a narcissist, they have such a powerful need to be in control that they want to break life down into right, wrong, black, white kind of paradigms. And of course, they're the keeper of correctness. And so they're going to superimpose their sense of correctness onto you. And in the process, there's one really large necessary characteristic that's missing in the way that they relate, and that's the characteristic of wisdom. Now, narcissists can be very smart. Some of them are smart, some of them you kind of wonder, don't you? They can have lots of ideas about how to do things, and you know, that has its place, that's good. And yet that sense of wisdom is lacking, and as a result, some of the nuanced elements that go into the making of a healthy relationship are completely set off to the side. Now, let me see if I can give you a very, very simple illustration as to how knowledge versus wisdom can work. Let's suppose that I'm speaking with an 8-year-old child, and I ask that person, why should you not hit your little brother when you become angry? Well, the 8-year-old is probably going to say something like, well, you're not supposed to, or that's not right, or you're going to get in trouble. In other words, they're going to appeal to very concrete thinking. Let's suppose, though, that I ask that same question of an 18-year-old, why should you not hit your younger brother when you become angry? And I'm hoping they're going to have a higher order of thinking they appeal to. They may say something to the effect of, when you show disrespect when you are angry, then the message you're trying to send is probably not going to be sent, so you need to come up with a message that's going to be more in line with dignity and respect so that you can get down the road towards conflict resolution. Now, that would reflect a form of wisdom. Narcissists, they can't do that. Now, I want you to think about all the many different parts of life that require wisdom beyond just knowledge. For example, let's suppose that you have a person inside the family who is dreading going to an extended family gathering, and they're talking about how it leaves them feeling. Well, the narcissist just goes to right and wrong. Well, here's what you need to do. You should do this and you shouldn't do that. End of discussion. As opposed to the wise person is going to say something like, yeah, I remember the last couple of times we had some real conflicts and you came on the low end of that conflict, didn't you? Tell me what's going on there, and let's talk about how we might want to adjust before we make the trek over there to that extended family member's house. That would be more of a wise way of looking at it. Or let's suppose that you know somebody that does have a bad temper and they're struggling with anger and tension and frustration. Well, the narcissist can say, you shouldn't feel that way, and here's what you need to do instead, and besides, you know, I'm right and you're making my life miserable. Wisdom says, when somebody's feeling angry and they have a temper, something's going on behind the scenes. Let's slow down long enough to talk about what that is and see if we can speak into the situation. You see the difference? Knowledge, wisdom, knowledge just appeals to the facts and the facts alone. Wisdom says there's something much bigger here. Let's look into the big picture. Now, before I go a little bit further, I do want to make you aware that below the video we have some links to some books that I hope are going to help you in this. One that will actually address this quite a bit is one of my books called The Anger Trap. Another, When Pleasing You is Killing Me. And then I have another link for Laura Carranza's book, Ugly Love. And so I hope you'll avail yourself to those links, and they can help you in your library. And then if you would, we'd like for you to subscribe to our channel so that we can let you know when more videos come up. We'd like to stay in touch with you. Now, let's understand what we're talking about when we say that you need to approach life with a sense of wisdom. Wisdom means that you use understanding to see what the bigger picture is, and there's a sense of compassion that tends to go along with wisdom. Wisdom means that you know how to adjust when someone has an emotional reaction, and you recognize that the emotion is speaking into something a little bit bigger. There's a system behind that emotion that we want to get into and tap into, as opposed to just simply saying, quit feeling this and feel that instead. Wisdom implies a sense of discernment, recognizing that life is multi-layered. It just doesn't necessarily fit into very tight little categories. Wisdom might imply that you can critique without being a critic. And that's its own delicate kind of task. Now, I want you to think how that contrasts with the way that a narcissist thinks and how they approach life. The narcissist doesn't factor in extenuating circumstances. The narcissist thinks, well, there's a certain way things need to go, and wouldn't you know, it happens to be mine, let's just make it happen. The narcissist forgets that other people have legitimate perspectives. They have such a sense of entitlement, they have such a need to be superior, that the thought that they need to factor in somebody else almost feels like an insult to them. Like, what do you mean? My way of doing things is just fine. We don't need anybody else's because other people are considered to be inadequate. The narcissist is so focused on me, on self, that they don't like to factor in somebody else's thoughts and needs and feelings and perceptions. The narcissist can be very uncomfortable with the human dimension. You know, when we have a sense of wisdom, we recognize that it's more than just formulas, that life consists of more than just doing things correctly. There are all sorts of other kinds of elements that we need to factor into. Narcissists, they can be very uncomfortable going into that human realm, particularly when there's soft emotion that might be applied, or particularly when there's some unusual circumstances that just don't fit the slots that they have. Well, that said, narcissists really do like to act as if life is supposed to fit into a neat agenda. They've already got a whole long list of how things are supposed to be, and it becomes their job to make sure that, that life lives according to that. Knowledge, not wisdom. Now, my question to you is, when you encounter this narcissistic tendency towards knowledge over wisdom, how do you react? Now, I'm hoping that the answer to that question is, well, I react with a lot of wisdom myself. That's kind of where I'm going with this, by the way. Most people, though, when they encounter the narcissist who has to be correct, they kind of set aside some of their own wisdom. And they can either match pitch and go toe-to-toe with that narcissist. Many times, it's easy for you to become very defensive, which means you try to justify who you are and what you think, or you can rationalize. Sometimes your defensiveness means that you tell lies. I'll just cover up because I don't want to go into the hassle. Sometimes when that narcissist has this sense of correctness without wisdom, you explode with anger. Sometimes you appeal. Sometimes you can keep secrets. Sometimes you might withdraw. Does any of that ever happen with you? I want to see if we can zero in on 4 alternatives to those kinds of behaviors that can prompt you to respond to that knowledgeable narcissist, but not wise narcissist, in a way that's going to further your cause in such a way that at least you can have a sense of decency and steadiness in your own life. First, let's focus on the need for patience. Wise people employ patience on a regular basis. You know, one of the things that, at least as a therapist, that I figured out is that whenever somebody comes in with a problem, we may have to take a little bit of time to sift through all of this. There's always a backstory. And to dig into that backstory requires that we're not just running straight to the finish line saying, well, here's how we have to handle things. And we're able instead to slow down and take the time that's necessary to sift through and explore who that person is. Narcissists, when you ask when you think about patience in a narcissist, it's like, that tends not to be a very common combination. They tend to be very impatient with the way that things go. It wouldn't surprise you to know that a guy like me would say, wisdom also requires empathy. There are feelings, there are needs, there are hurts, there are interpretations, preferences, desires. There's a history that people bring with them whenever they engage with you. And the empathizer says, I want to go inside and talk about that and see if we can factor that into the equation here so that we can have a good understanding of who you are and where we want to go. And so empathy becomes a primary ingredient so that we can get beyond just correct versus incorrect. Well, part of the defining feature of narcissism is the lack of empathy. They don't like to go there. It's like, I don't need to find out what you think. You just need to do what I say. Or another characteristic that will take us to the place of wisdom, and that is contemplation. In fact, contemplation actually is a centerpiece when we think about a wise person. And wisdom requires us to ask, how does this situation in front of me fit with where I'm trying to go with my life in general? The narcissist, they're concerned with one thought, and that is, who's right? Me. Who's wrong? You. Then let's get things corrected. The wise person says, oh, there's more going on here. And so who am I? What do I stand for? What do I believe in? And where does this fit into that entire paradigm? And then finally, we can say that the wise person understands that you're more than just what you believe. Your identity is built on things like goodness, or kindness, or fair-mindedness, or firmness, or compassion. It's more than just, I think this is right and I think that's wrong. You have a much broader base that you draw upon. So let's conclude by saying that when we go back to that question, why does the narcissist always have to be right? Well, unfortunately, they're thinking like that 8-year-old child. Here's what the rules say, according to me, and I'm the one that wrote the rule book, and here's what you're supposed to do. But I'm hoping that you, as you respond to that narcissist, can take it to a much higher order of thinking, recognizing there's always something bigger going on here, and I'm very willing to take the time and the effort to delve into that. If the narcissist can't do that, then I'm going to need to take my thinking and apply it in that fashion anyway. I don't require their cooperation in order for me to have a wise response, even if that other person is showing a great lack of wisdom. It's not easy because we tend to get pulled in, yet at the same time, this implies that you get to be your own separate you.